Hey guys, in this video we are going to look at musical modes, what they are, how they're used in music, and why we even use them in the first place. Now, to be honest, I personally wasn't really interested in modes for a super long time. I'd heard about them, I knew that there were patterns beyond the major scale, but with names like Phrygian and Mixolydian and Locrian, it all seemed so exotic and complicated that I just ignored them. But it turns out that they're actually not complicated, that they're useful and really explain how some of the best songs were written, and they really open up your palette, open up your options as a songwriter. So here, let's just dive in and really understand musical modes. Now, as you may know, much of Western music is based on the 8 notes of the major scale, like this C major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, with its interval pattern of whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, which we can label with scale degrees 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This sequence sounds so satisfying, and it's fundamental to music, as I explained in another video, in the way that all major scales form a continual ring we call the circle of fifths, which reveals how all keys and notes in music are connected. A pattern that we can picture using the color wheel to really see these connections. And by rearranging the circle of fifths back into the 12 notes of the chromatic scale, we can see how all notes are related using color, to then pick out the major scale in any key. So again, looking at the C major scale as an example, this pattern sounds nice. And so solid that it's the basis of most melodies in Western music that just rearrange the sequence into new patterns, like say Pachelbel's Canon, or a classic like Beethoven's Ode to Joy, and really the majority of songs in popular music today are also based on this scale, including tunes like the Beatles' Let It Be, Queen's Bicycle Race, and thousands more. And the reason it sounds so good is that this pattern, the major scale, is just a rearranged segment of the circle of fifths. You see, in the circle of fifths, these 7 notes are all close consonant neighbors, even like family, all next to each other like this. But when you rearrange the circle of fifths into the chromatic scale, this subset of notes gets separated, spaced out at a series of whole step and half step intervals that we call the major scale. So playing them in sequence like this is like a family reunion of sorts, reuniting these notes that were originally close to each other in the circle of fifths. In a nutshell, this is why the major scale sounds so good, and in turn why it's used so much to write melodies. I mean, you can form almost any pattern from these notes, and it's practically bound to sound good, like this. It's nice, right? But if the major scale was all we had to draw from, then music would get boring really fast because everything would feel very familiar. And all songs would also sound a little too upbeat and happy, like the major scale itself. I mean, we could play Ode to Joy, for example, with its joyful sound, but music wouldn't reflect the broader range of human emotion. And so this is where modes come in, because they give us an expanded set of note and interval patterns to create a wider range of musical styles. And they're actually really easy to play because they're just permutations of the major scale that work like this. Let's say we play the major scale. It's built from the interval pattern of whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, that we can also refer to as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Because this pattern is capped by C notes at both ends, the C note serves as the scale's tonal home base. It begins and ends on C, reinforcing C as the most important tone. But if we wanted to shift the tonal home base a bit, we can play this same group of notes, but starting on, say, scale degree 2, to play what's called the Dorian mode, which sounds like this. Because we begin and end on D instead, this interval pattern is a little different. Instead of the familiar whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half of the major scale, the Dorian mode is built from a pattern of whole, half, whole, 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 half, whole. And we can label these notes as 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 8. So it sort of sounds like the major scale, but with its intervals of flat 3 and flat 7, it has a distinctly more melancholy sound. It's not completely depressing, but it's more mellow than the major scale for sure. So you can hear the difference. I'm going to play the same melodies before, starting with the major scale, and then I'm going to shift to the Dorian mode. So here's the melody based on the major scale pattern. And then here's the melody shifted up a scale degree, starting on D as the home bass, or in the Dorian mode. Same interval pattern, but with D as the home bass. You can hear the difference, right? Now, the name Dorian may sound a little weird, but it's just a reference to the region in ancient Greece inhabited by people called Dorians back in the day. If you remember from art history class, the different styles of Greek architecture and the kinds of columns they designed, there were three main varieties, including Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. The Dorian mode in music is a reference to the same people and region known for the Doric style of column. That's where the name Dorian comes from. And actually, the major scale itself is also sometimes called the Aeolian mode, named for the people and region known for the Ionic style of architecture. Ionian mode, Ionic column. It's the same basic name referring to the same area in ancient Greece. And while there isn't a Corinthian mode, like this style of column, the next mode we can derive from the major scale is called the Phrygian mode, named after the Greek region of Phrygia to the northeast. And we play it by shifting one more note to the right to begin and end the pattern on scale degree 3. Or in the key of C, that's the E note. E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. Again, when we retain the same interval pattern of the major scale, also known as the Ionian mode, this gives the Phrygian mode an unusual exotic sound. Or half, whole, 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 half, whole, whole. With E as the tonic, the scale degrees are 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 8. Compared to the Ionian mode, the Phrygian feels much more dark and mysterious due to its use of intervals flat 2, flat 3, flat 6, and flat 7. And if you were to build a melody based on these notes, it would sound equally exotic. So I'm going to play the same little melody as before, starting with the Ionian mode, or based on the major scale, then I'm going to shift to the Phrygian mode for you to hear the difference. Again, here it is in the Ionian mode with C as the home bass. And then here it is in the Phrygian mode, shifted up so that E is the home bass. Okay, so you can see where this is going, right? We can play different modes by continuing to shift the home bass, beginning and ending on each successive note of the major scale, and the result sounds a bit different in each mode. And the next one is called the Lydian mode, named after the ancient Greek region of Lydia, which begins on the fourth note of the major scale. So in the key of C, that's F. From F to F is the Lydian mode. So, or whole, 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 half, whole, whole, half. We could also call it 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It sounds interesting, right? And it's almost identical to the Ionian mode, but with that sharp 4, it gives it kind of a spacey, bright, and even curious sound. To hear it even more distinctly, I'm going to play the same little melody snippet I did before, but starting with the Ionian mode, and then shifting to the Lydian mode so you can hear the difference. So here it is in the Ionian mode. And then shifting up to the Lydian mode has kind of a spacey sound. And that's what I mean. By playing in various modes, you can create some unique sounds that you otherwise wouldn't hear if you stuck with the Ionian mode or the major scale all of the time. Of course, all of the notes still sound good together because of their close connection in the circle of fifths. But by shifting the tonal home bass within each mode, the interval pattern played also changes, which results in the different and unique sounds we hear. And the next mode that forms, called the Mixolydian mode, sounds just as good in its own way. It starts on the 5th scale degree, so in the key of C, that's G. So from G to G, that is the home bass. The interval pattern is whole, whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole. And we can label these notes as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 8. It's nearly the same as the major scale or the Aeolian mode, but that flat 7 gives it an extra bit of energy or bounce. In fact, you could even say the Mixolydian mode has a kind of Celtic flair to it, as you can hear when I play the same sample melody as before, starting with the Ionian mode for comparison, and then I'll shift to the Mixolydian mode, and you can hear the difference. Now shifting to the Mixolydian mode, it sounds like this. All right, so we're in the home stretch here with only 2 more modes to go, and the next one, called the Aeolian mode, named after the Greek region of Aeolus, is by far the most popular mode of all, after the Ionian mode, that is. And it begins on the 6th scale degree of the major scale, so in the key of C, that is A. From A to A is the Aeolian mode. The interval pattern is whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole, which we can label as 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 8. It sounds familiar, right? In fact, the Aeolian mode is so satisfying and popular that it's often just called the minor scale. And it's minor because of that minor third interval that gives it its trademark, dramatic, and even romantic melancholy feel. So the Ionian mode, or major scale, is the most popular. And then the Aeolian mode, or the minor scale, is the next most common that you'll hear. And with its interval pattern, the Aeolian mode's interval pattern of 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, and 8, it has an enchanting and even haunting effect on really any pattern you play. So for example, I'm going to play that same snippet of melody, starting with the Ionian mode, which sounds very jaunty and happy, and then we're going to shift to the Aeolian mode, and it's suddenly going to sound epic. So here it is in Ionian. And then shifted up to Aeolian, sounds very different. It's beautiful, right? The Aeolian mode sounds amazing. So you'll hear a lot of music that's composed using this interval pattern. And last but not least is the Locrian mode, named after the ancient Greek region of Locris. Actually, better said, it really is the last and least, because this mode is rarely used at all. Starting on the 7th note of the major scale, so in the key of C, that's B, the Locrian mode spans from B to B, with B as the tonal home bass. The interval pattern is half, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 or 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7, 8. It's basically the same as the Phrygian mode, but with a flatted 5th. And as a result, it sounds very unstable, abstract, and just plain dissonant. To illustrate, I'm going to play our sample melody again, starting with the Ionian mode, to play that pattern, and then we're going to shift to the Locrian mode to really hear the difference. So here it is in Ionian mode. And then here it is in Locrian mode. It's not quite as satisfying, right? But like all the other modes, it gives us a new tonal center and bass pattern to work with. So here's a quick recap and comparison of the 7 modes. They all use the same notes, but they're just permutations of the major scale, permutations of the Ionian mode. And here's the melody that we've been playing in each mode, side by side, so you can hear the comparison. These are the 7 modes that are possible in each key. And of course, we focused on just the key of C here, but because all 12 keys in music are symmetrical and follow the same underlying patterns, the modes in every key work in the same way. Each one begins on a different scale degree of that key's major scale to shift the tonal home base of that mode, whether we're in the key of G, or D, or A, or E, etc. And with all of this variety to choose from, you can do so much as a songwriter. These modes open up so many options to create the kind of sound you want in any key. So thank you for watching, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.